like big.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Frenchtown Community Advisory Group.
Oh my gosh.
Hello.
Oh, good, Deb. I'm glad you can hear.
We can hear you great. Thanks.
You can hear great. That's awesome. Okay, so there's no internet in the room and we printed off the wrong agenda. Welcome to the Frenchtown Community Advisory. Today is May 2nd. Go later. Frenchtown Community Advisory Group meetings are held monthly and citizens are encouraged to participate. This isn't our statement. It's right here.
Check the agenda.
The agenda is still the same.
Yeah.
You do it all day.
No, okay. To serve as the trusted liaison between the community, the Environmental Protection Agency, and the Montana Department of Environmental Quality by becoming informed, sharing this information with the public, and engaging in the Superfund process to ensure the restoration of the former Smurfit Stone Mill site to a healthy ecological state for future generations. Now we're going to do introductions. And we'll start with Bunny.
I'm Bunny Sims, and I'm trying to take notes of people who are here. I'm helping my husband there, Bruce, who's supposed to be the secretary.
Okay. And then we'll go. Oh, you do? Great. Will
Bolland, toxicologist with EPA in the Region 8 office. I'm the human health risk assessor for the site.
Carolina Ballou with EPA, and I am the Montana supervisor out of the Helena office.
Barry Weeks, former mill employee.
Allie Archer, project manager for EPA.
Recording in progress.
Oh, good job. That's me. Mackenzie Meter, community involvement coordinator with EPA. I can't seem to join the Zoom meeting. It's just.
Jerry Dallas, part of the CAG admin team.
David Schmetterling, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Park.
Good, Jen.
I'm Jen Harrington. I'm part of the CAG admin team.
Trevor Selch, fish pollution biologist with Fish, Wildlife and Park, based out of Helena.
Brian Barkoyak, Natural Resource Management Program.
I'm Andrew Gorder, legal and policy director for the Clarkport Coalition.
I'm Sheba Aarons. I'm here with Senator John Tester's office.
And I'm Danley Logan, the state rep for House District 14.
Kelly Durbin Williams, Houston resident.
Kevin Stone, I'm the Federal Superfund section supervisor at Montana.
Brianna Pabst, I'm the project manager for the site for DEP.
Kevin Howard with Haley and Aldrich. I'm supporting Montana DEQ.
Willis Kearney, 7th District 49.
Katie Garson Corvo, Bureau Chief for DEQ, Federal Superfund for the state, and then Matter is in my program.
Brian Chapman, incoming executive director of the Clarkport Coalition.
And Sam Carlson, staff scientist, Clarkport Coalition.
All right, and I'm Elena Evans, environmental health manager at the Missoula Polk Health Department. Let's go online. MCAT is here recording this. Thank you. Then let's go with Deb.
Hi there, Deb Fosnot. I'm with Watershed Education Network and just general interest in how the Smurfit keg is going. And I so appreciate being able to beam in to the meeting. Thanks so much.
And then Catherine
LaCourse.
Yep.
Catherine LaCour with EA Engineering, Science and Technology, contractor support for EPA.
Great. Dee Fleming.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
I'm from Columbia Falls and I do research on water quality. I'm just interested in the meeting and how the liaison works.
Welcome.
Thank you.
All right, Lindsay, here to help Trevor probably.
Lindsay Gilstrap, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks.
All right, Donovan.
Yeah, I'm Donovan Bell, Montana Fish, Wildlife and Parks.
Great. Shannon.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shannon Terry. I'm Director of Environmental Health at Missoula Public Health.
Great. Sydney.
Sydney Riddle, I work at GSI.
All right.
Where? Yes, I.
It's a new field.
Oh, right.
Okay, Crystal.
Yeah, hi everyone. Sorry, I was having some technical difficulties. My name's Crystal Katowski-Edmonds, and I'm a environmental protection specialist with EPA and on the site team.
Great. Laura.
Hey, everyone. Yeah, everyone. Laura Lundquist, Missoula Current reporter.
Great. Ying.
Hi, everyone. My name's Ying Yu. I'm the risk assessor for DPHHS.
Great. Okay, that's everybody online. And then I will read our agenda. It is Trevor and David of Montana FWP will discuss preliminary results of the passive sampling for dioxin in the Clark Fork River. And then Allie Archer / Mackenzie with EPA will give an update on sampling. And then we'll have public comments or questions. Great. Okay, so smooth. Let's. Okay, here we go, Trevor. I'm gonna, hold on a second. I have to share the screen. Then. On. No. Oh, no.
It's up on top. Bring this.
I know, I'm trying to slide this down. Here, we'll just do this.
Look at that.
And then we'll do this. You guys are just.
We are all supportive of this.
It always seems to look so smooth when you're watching it on TV. Okay, well, thanks, Lena. Again, Trevor Selch, fish pollution biologist, wildlife and parks based out of Helena. Been working on this site kind of ever since started doing assessment and having meetings after it was proposed to be listed. This study here that I'm going to talk about was really the response from finalizing the ecological and human health risk assessments, and what that led to was fish consumption advisory on the Clark Fork from the Bitterroot all the way down to the Flathead. And so there's quite a partnership here. You can see all the partners kind of representatives and agencies and NGOs on the bottom, including CSKT, and we all submitted a grant application to the Columbia River Toxins Grant Program. And we were successful in that. And so we collected this data in 2023, and that's what I'm going to kind of present today. This was Trout Unlimited was the applicant on this study. The grant amount was about $221,000 with our cost share about $82,000. And every single dime of this went to the lab analysis. These are really expensive analyses. And so cost share between all these folks will be basically our field supplies and equipment. And then as we move into the outreach and education phase of it is really where we'll be making up the rest of that cost share for that grant. Unfortunately, I can't present any of the fish tissue data yet. We're still dealing with some QA stuff that we got to work through. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the presentation.
What's QA means?
Oh, sorry, quality assurance. Just working through some of the detections that come from the lab that we got to kind of account for. And so I'll just be presenting the results of the passive samplers here today. This study you can see kind of on the right there. I know it's small and whatnot. The fish sampling, we had 17 fish sampling locations. Again, I won't be talking about those today. The passive samplers there are shown in red. There was 19 of those locations. And the reason there's less is we didn't sample downstream of the mill for fish because we did a lot of that in 2018, 2019 with the EPA. And again, this grant really, the purpose of this grant is not to assess a Superfund site. And so the reason we were really trying to assess couple things. Where are other sources within the Columbia River Basin of Montana? And then what about fish consumption below where we sampled with EPA? So downstream, St. Regis was the furthest we sampled downstream previously. And so what does that mean below the Flathead and then upstream in that basin as well? So again, just talking about the passive samplers. And these are the sites. This is FWP Region 2, so you can see up in Butte, working our way down. Huge effort to do this. This was a large scale project, working with a lot of the biologists and more importantly, their technicians that are out there, collecting these fish and working with us to make sure we get the fish we need from each one of these sites.
So only one site on the Bitterroot?
2 sites. Sorry, it might not have been. There's 2 sites. We have one up by Hamilton and then another site at Buckhouse Bridge there coming in. Also
further down.
Yep. Okay. Yep. And there's 2 sites on the Blackfoot. Well, just 1 site on the Flathead. So as the Clark Fork kind of doglegs meets up with the Flathead, that comes into FWP Region 1. And so we sampled, Flathead River, Plains of Paradise section, and then the 3 reservoirs that eventually lead down into Idaho. And so what we used was these passive samplers. Those of you may have heard this term before. There's a lot of names for them that have come over the years. The USGS kind of came out with these quite a long time ago, and they called them SPMDs or semi-permeable membrane devices. They're also called lipid bags, or people call them fat bags. It's basically a lipid material that's kind of put out in the environment. And so when you have these hydrophobic compounds that are toxic at really, really low concentrations, what this allows you to do is you put that out there over an extended window. We deployed ours for 30 days. It accumulates those toxins, and then the lab has a way to calculate based on the time that it's been out there to give you an estimated water concentration. So it's just a better way to look at that. We use the lab, Serum Labs. They're actually based out of Canada. It was a pretty smooth operation with them sending you down the materials. You submit them to a lab in Knoxville. They get the results. They get back to them and do some final calculations for you. This is a schematic I drew up when I was kind of putting my proposal together, and this is actually what ended up being what we went with. We wanted that sampler, fairly close to the bottom, but out freestanding. And again, this is looking at bioavailable dioxins, furans, coplanar, PCBs. And so Lindsay introduced herself. She should have told you that she's basically the one that executed the majority of this. She's the one out there, not only putting all these samplers in the river, but weekly going on and checking them, moving them around to make sure they're safe. That's just on the right there. You can kind of see an example of what those kind of looked like. So we deployed these at 19 sites, and after I got them all in the water, it was a stressful time because these samplers are out there. You don't want them to get stolen or fouled up. And I asked my colleague David Schmetterling how many of these 19 samplers does he expect me to recover, and he said 11. But we got 18 back. Wow. One site we did lose. It was a trouble from the beginning. It was the tourist site. We placed the sampler in there. And within a couple of days, Trout Limited has some AmeriCorps workers that were out checking, and they noticed that it had been moved about 20 yards, and we found the beaver had moved it and chewed on the float a little bit. But then we found the beaver dam downstream, which we didn't see initially. But he left it alone the rest of the time. But then about a couple of weeks into the study, we came back and found it propped up on a log. And so some kind citizen decided to sabotage that site. And that's at the tourist site. And so a lot of these sites were kind of bookending where major tributaries came in. And so this would kind of be between Bearmouth, where Flint Creek comes in, and then this would kind of have incorporated Rock Creek, but we don't unfortunately have that site. So each site was kind of custom built based on water depths. We did our best to kind of camouflage them. We kind of weighed on whether we wanted to put signs up. We ended up deciding to put a sign up at every site, figuring if someone, these were out, middle of July to middle of August, a lot of recreation going on, a lot of people on the water. We figured if someone were to find it, maybe they'll look at the sign and say, okay, I'll leave that alone. But didn't get any phone calls. I have my phone number on there. But here's Lindsay kind of putting that one sampler in. You can see on the right, once it's deployed, it's, fairly hard to see. Lindsay went back like weekly. The water levels were dropping quite a bit through the study. So she was constantly kind of moving these things around. I kind of triangulate. I took some photos and video when she placed a sampler and based on a point that I could triangulate so we could hopefully find them. And that seemed to work out pretty well. Here's Lindsay putting one in at the Scotty Brown Fishing Access site. I think she had actually put it in, but she wanted to move it like 2 inches, and so she had to go back down and make sure it was behind the perfect rock, so it was protected there. And then here's her, I think this is the Bitterroot Hamilton section. She's hanging out down there, adjusting it, making sure it's perfectly in place. We didn't want anything to come floating down and dislodge it, and wanted to kind of have it protected. Yeah, it's just some more examples of it. Each time, when she went out and moved a sampler because the water levels were dropping a little bit, she kind of made narrations on the slides as, so we knew where to find it. On the right there is when we retrieved the samplers. You can see closer, higher up the Clark Fork, obviously a lot of metal precipitate iron on there. Rinse that screen off, and then that was just mailed in as that, and they take that lipid material off that's on the inside there. So, what we were looking at this was dioxins, furans, and coplanar PCBs. And so here we've got our list of dioxins, our furans, and our coplanar PCBs, which are called dioxin-like PCBs. And so rather than, the way you look at them is rather than looking at each one individually, they have different toxicities. So this toxic equivalency factor is basically multiplied by any concentration that you find. And so, for example, the most toxic ones are just multiplied by 1, so their concentration doesn't change. But if you were to detect some of these other ones, you're multiplying by that number, which will reduce the toxicity. And then what you basically do is add them up. Not get into the weeds of non-detects or half detection limits, but you're basically adding up those calculations, and then you kind of have one number to kind of look at there. And on the right, you can see the toxicity of the dioxins, furans, and the coplanar PCBs. So the dioxins are actually, a lot of them are a lot more toxic than the PCBs. I also listed this biotic sediment accumulation factor, and what that really is just like how readily they accumulate in the biota and fish particularly. So you can see the higher the number, the more readily they accumulate. So there's some higher ones with the dioxins and even some of the furans, but these coplanar PCBs are just so much more bioaccumulative than the dioxins were. And so that's why, if you remember from the risk assessments, that's what was really driving the fish advisory, was those PCBs. So yeah, again, TEFs here, we have those accumulation factors here. You can just see those coplanar PCBs are just so much more readily accumulated. And that's really a function, of their solubility and that accumulation factor there. Those PCBs just so much more readily accumulate in the fish. So just keep that in mind when we're looking at concentrations. The PCBs are going to be quite a bit lower than the other ones, but they're also a lot more persistent to be getting into the fish. So here's the results, and I know it's a big thing to look at right away, so we'll just kind of walk through the sites because those won't be as familiar with everyone. So on the y-axis, we have our passive sampler TEQ. That's the that one number we get from all the dioxins, furans, and coplanar PCBs. And just working our way down the Clark Fork and then with the tributaries, this first site being Highway 1, so that's Silver Bowl Creek. We saw our highest concentration at Silver Bowl Creek, dropped at pH shack. One of our lowest concentrations was at Williams Tavener. Speaking with Pat Saffel, who's the fish manager, he pointed out that Williams Tavener section is really where a lot of those irrigation return flows come in. So maybe that's a factor on that dropping there. Phosphate, I think all of us have seen the phosphate sign on the highway and the Barrowmouth sign just up there. So that spiked back up. So we saw those higher concentrations. Again, Barrowmouth, that's taken into account. That's below Drummond, below Flint Creek. This tourist site, again, that's the one we lost. Then we've got the Blackfoot coming in. It was surprising that upper Blackfoot Scotty Brown's site, which is, kind of almost like a control site, had some elevated concentrations, mainly from dioxins. It's covered up there on the top, but the total DTEQ is shown in blue. The dioxin contribution of furan is shown in green, and then the PCBs are shown in yellow. So you can see pretty much the whole way, the majority of that TEQ is being fed by those dioxins and furans. So moving down below where the Blackfoot comes in, the Kelly site, so that's downstream of Missoula, downstream of the wastewater treatment plant. So you can see, even though we had some elevated concentrations here and then our most upstream site, by the time we got down below Missoula, the concentrations were actually pretty low. And that's always been, we've always talked about, whether Missoula is a source of the dioxins or PCBs, and at least this doesn't indicate that they are. And in fact, it almost seems like they're cleaning it up a little bit higher concentration in the Bitterroot. And then here Harper, so that's just upstream of the mill there. And then Erskine's downstream down to St. Regis. You can see that it spikes back up down there in the total TEQ. We got some dilution going on from Kukusin, that's the Flathead River coming in there. And then this Paradise to Plains section. And then we had a spike up going into Thompson Falls Reservoir there. And so I'm going to show this again in a few slides, just kind of pointing out things more specifically. You know, down here in the lower Clark Fork, this is that same data, just kind of zoomed in a little bit more. Again, we got our passive sampler TEQ. Here's the Blackfoot, again, downstream of Missoula wastewater treatment plant. Bitterroot, there's the Smurfit site there, and those 3 sites that are pretty consistent with the total TEQ, the Flathead River, and then that Plains section. So I mentioned, you know, the significance of the PCBs, and so those were shown on that previous slide, but they were kind of muffled given the whole total TEQ and the contribution from the dioxins. And so here, this is that same data basically shown, but I'm just showing the PCBs. So you can see we've got some spikes down here. We had that one, you know, the Blackfoot site there, that's basically right across from the Bonner Mill. So maybe there's a source there, but by the time we get to Missoula, we're just not seeing that signature there. Low concentrations in the Bitterroot, and then we're seeing that spike up around the mill a little bit. Goes back down the Flathead and that high concentration down in that Paradise to Plains section.
On that Plains section, where was your test site?
So that was across the bridge there where that fishing, you know, that bridge there just upstream. It was on that frontage road on the far side, about a mile or 2.
Paradise?
Yeah.
Or down by the Plains itself?
Plains, yeah.
I just wondered, would that have anything to do with that old tie plant in Paradise?
I have no idea.
That spiked me so high.
Yeah.
It's not coming from the Flathead.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't.
It was that tie plant right out of Paradise that they did the work on, and I just wondered if there's a residual with that.
That's good. Yeah, it's good to think about. I haven't dove into. I know some of the sites. I've thought, okay, this might be a source, but I haven't. Yeah, I'm not that familiar with that area at all. So yeah, any input would be good to know. So this is just getting into more of a discussion of concentration versus load. Obviously, as you move downstream, the flows ramp up considerably. This is kind of a hypothetical example. I used, you know, again, we got our passive TEQ. This is the actual concentration we found in Silverboat Creek, and obviously Silverboat Creek flows into the ponds and whatnot. But as we move downstream, this is just the dilution that would occur just from that one site if no other inputs were added, just to kind of show it as an example of the dilution that occurs as you move down the Clark Fork. You know, obviously the flows, you know, pick up considerably, and, you know, the major tributaries. That was, yeah. So this flows 33 CFS to 120 would dilute it that much. And of course, you got your inputs from the Blackfoot, the Bitterroot, and then the Flathead, you know, being quite a significant input there. So I know Donovan on the call, he helped out with pulling out some of these numbers for us and putting this together. So this is the same. This is now just the Clark Fork. This is the same data you've been looking at, just moving down the Clark Fork with our TEQ. And we kind of did some just flow modeling. Basically, we took the concentration at the upstream site and then added the flows at a downstream site and what our expected concentration would be with that dilution. In the cases of where we had tributary input, we used both, obviously, the concentration and the flows upstream. And so for example, here at the Kelly Island, so this is the Missoula site. This is what we actually saw. But because of that input from the Blackfoot and this upstream site, we kind of expected it. It should have, you know, we predicted it to be quite higher. And then at the Harper site, which is just upstream in the mill, this is what we actually found. What we anticipated based on the upstream concentrations and the flows from the Bitterroot that should have actually been much lower. And then where the Flathead came in, that one was actually predicted fairly well. And so doing all those calculations is kind of hard to visualize. And so on the right here, it's just the passive sampler residual. So that's just the observed concentration subtracted from the predicted concentration. And that kind of gets at, you know, potential sources from a concentration perspective. So here we can see, I assume that would be 0 at, you know, at the upstream site. So here's the source of Silverboat Creek. PH Shack still had a source. Williams Tavener, where, you know, we saw that quite a significant drop. That was a lot lower. A little bit of a spike at phosphate. Bearmouth, again, this downstream of Missoula, we saw that significant dilution going on there. And then Harper's just above the mill, looks to be like a source, and that's kind of carried pretty consistently. And then we have a spike again at T Falls. And so that's from a concentration perspective. And so obviously the concentration is just how much for a given volume. But as we move downstream, you know, obviously the flows pick up quite substantially. And so we see the concentration overall maybe going down, but if we calculate a load on that, the load actually kind of increases as we go downstream. So from this case, a load, you know, often calculated is just like how many pounds of a contaminant per day is getting pushed downstream. Because we're dealing with dioxins, and because I'm Canadian, I like the metric system. I used just grams, you know, over the 30 days. So this number is kind of, you know, kind of strange, but it's just the load in grams of total TEQ over a 30-day period. And you can see, like, you know, even though we have this significant source up here from a load perspective, you know, that's not that much. You know, as we move downstream, again, Kelly Island, we're seeing, you know, a reduced load there. But then we're upstream of just upstream of the mill there, we have, you know, definitely a load going on. Pretty significant, then it kind of spikes up and really goes up there in that Thompson Falls reach. So fish sampling, again, can't present the data yet. We're working through that and going to get that out as soon as we possibly can. Again, can't thank the crews enough for all their efforts they did there. Want to talk about some of the QA, QC stuff we got. And so when we take,
excuse me?
Yeah.
QA/QC?
Sorry, quality assurance, quality control. So just stuff we do. So when we take our fish samples, you know, we get them out of the field, we rinse them with site water, they're placed in a Ziploc bag, we bring them back to the lab where they're basically weighed and measured. We wrap them in tinfoil, put them back in a different bag, and then that's basically frozen, eventually set off to the lab. And so one of the QA/QC components of this was to basically take water, you rinse it over the materials that you're using to send the fish in to make sure there's no contamination going on. So we got the $500 bottle of ultra clean water. We pour that over the tinfoil, we pour it into the bag, and we pour that into an amber bottle, and we send that into the lab. And here's the results we got from that super clean water. So here's all the different sites that we had submitted there, for example. And here's the concentrations of dioxins they found in there. So I was just like, wow, how can that be that this much contamination is going on? And it wasn't until I scrolled down the lab report. Oops, sorry. And just so you know, this is the surface water TEQ. So that's the DEQ circular 7 surface water criteria. That's how low that actually is. So they also run lab blanks. And so they've got their own water and they run it as a lab blank. And this is where their lab blank came. And so basically we were all but one were lower than this lab blank. So it's pretty evident that there's laboratory contamination going on. And so I don't do a lot of water sampling. And so this was pretty strange. And so I ended up talking with David Bowers, and David manages the Montana Pole site, and they have a discharge permit where they have to measure dioxins, and they've been running into this same issue. And in fact, so we use ALS as our lab. David did a study where they sent some of the ultra pure water off to several samples to Pace Analytical and Test America. So we used ALS. So those are probably 3 of the biggest labs in the country. And their mean concentration from all those, background concentration was 2.04, and we had 2.06, basically identical. So that's one of the things we're trying to incorporate, and what that means in the fish tissue. We still haven't got the PCB rinsate blanks, so that, in addition to looking at the dioxins and furans, looking at the PCB, full planar PCBs, and we're still waiting to get that back. We did have, so in addition to the water, they have reference material as well, which is basically clean material, clean, tissue that they run through their analysis. And there are some hits in that we're going to have to account for. They're a lot less than the water, but we didn't have any coplanar PCB hits in the tissue. And those, again, are driving the advisories, especially downstream, which when I present that, you'll be able to see what I mean.
Go back a couple of slides.
How do I go back? This one?
Yeah, I think the one, the Harper's Bridge. I'm a little surprised that the Harper's Bridge is such a spike there. Did that surprise you too?
I mean, obviously water doesn't flow upstream, and that's upstream at the mill. I know we've always contested, about aerial deposition or whether that's going on. I don't have a source from that because it's not coming from Missoula and it's not coming from the Bitterroot. So, yeah, there's definitely a spike there.
It's a surprise.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. What else? Yeah. Okay. So yeah. So that's kind of it. Passive samplers seem to be fairly productive. Just keep in mind, again, we used our entire budget on the analytical. Again, these were one sampler, deployed over a 30-day period within a year, and so you got to take that into consideration if there's other loading or contamination going on at different times of the year. Again, we had a sample size of 1. It's more than a grab water sample. I mean, it's out there and it's collecting stuff over 30 days, but again, it's just 1 sample. We don't really have a measure of variability. Hoping to get that fish tissue information out absolutely as soon as possible. And I know there's already a lot of outreach events where we want to get this information to the public. Again, we sampled skin-on fillets for recreational consumers, and we also did whole body concentrations for tribal use as well. And obviously, there's already some discussions about future work that needs to be done. So obviously, this hopefully lead to some additional assessment in the basin. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, will you be doing the fish tissue on different species too, like the pike that way?
Yeah, so the fish we did, so we tried to target in the basin where there's trout. We tried to target rainbow trout. There's trout issues going on the Clark Fork right now. Fish are hard to come by, and so where there were no trout to catch, we did mountain whitefish, or a salmonid, obviously a false spawner, but so we took rainbows and mountain whitefish pretty much through the entire basin, and then in the lower reservoirs we did northern pike. So
I'm curious how they'll
yeah.
in comparison.
Yeah.
In the past, we collected northern pike.
Oh yeah, and that's in the past we've done. So when we did the 2019 work with EPA, we looked at rainbow trout and northern pike. So there already is, we already got data that was kind of the one of the foundations of the fish consumption guidance, but. We don't have pike. Pike are, they're kind of left over from Milltown down there in those backwater areas, so they're not found at all the sites. So, the rainbow trout are better in, representative species that you can kind of get at each one of the sites. So
now you're going to use the old data, but now you've got some new data in the same locations, right?
Some of it, yep.
Some of it would be interesting to see whether or not there's any change from the old data to the new data.
I already have a figure made up, but show you. But yeah, no, absolutely. We'll compare. Yeah, that's one of the things, comparing the previous to show up. And again, once we can qualify all that data, then I'll be able to present that. So,
okay.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the fish consumption advisory committee and sort of how that works and how you all look at data and put together to evaluate?
Yeah, good question. So when I took over my position was like in charge of doing fish consumption guidance for the state. And it wasn't until I started going to EPA meetings and realized I was the only person with Fish and Game running fish consumption advisories. So I thought maybe I should have, the Department of Public Health and Human Services, as well as DEQ that deals with public health and all these things. And so we kind of formed a board that kind of reviews these. So it's Fish, Wildlife and Parks, Department of Health and Human Services, and DEQ. And so a lot of times the decisions are easy if we go out and sample, if we're looking at mercury is, something common we look in the state. And so if we sample a species, we get the, 9 species, nine individuals, we do 3 composites. Here's the average concentration. We can, easily look at that in a table. Here's the, meals per month. Okay, 2 meals per month for this site for mercury, for example. I mean, that's something I can just quickly do. But these, these more complex contaminants, you're dealing with not only sample size limitations, variation. A lot of times you'll get one composite that's really high, it has a really high hit in it, and then one that's really low. So you got a lot of variability that you got to take into consideration. Maybe we wanted to get 10 individuals and we only got 4. And so we got to take that into consideration. And then of course, with these are really toxic compounds that are toxic at the part per quadrillion level. And so if you get non-detects, some of the policy is to look at 1/2 of the detection limit. The trouble is if you do that, you could have non-detects across the board and have fish consumption, void fish consumption everywhere, and you never actually detected anything. So you're playing all these factors and making decisions at what makes the most sense. So that's where the board kind of meets and looks at the data collectively and makes those calls. So. Yeah.
Real quick, Trevor, you mentioned that the passive samplers measure bioavailable dioxins and urines and PCBs. Can you clarify what that is and how that might relate to the total?
Yeah, just something, I mean, so they're hydrophobic compounds, and so they'll, they don't want to be in the water column, they don't want to be dissolved, or they don't want to be, floating and, bioavailable to the organisms and the fish. So, I mean, there might be a lot of contamination in the sediment or whatnot that's not going to be available to get into the fish, for example. And so this is like a dissolved fraction that's going to get into the, primary productivity, work its way up the food chain and be bioavailable to that fish. And so, I mean, obviously you can take sediment samples as well. In fact, these same samplers can be put in those in the sediment as well to look at groundwater infiltration and whatnot. But this is really, I'd say it's a real way to look at, like, you're only looking at what's really in the water column. These are contaminants that you wouldn't expect to see at high concentrations necessarily in the water.
And we have a question from Vicky online. It says, since PCBs tend to biomagnify more than dioxins do, it seems odd that these passive samplers pick up much more dioxins than PCBs. I thought the samplers were intended to simulate uptake similar to fish tissue. So one would expect the samplers to pick up more PCBs than dioxin like biotissue does.
So that's, it is similar to like fish tissue and what we're putting out there, but it's meant to actually give you a water concentration. So you're kind of using a lipid tissue to estimate a water concentration, not to estimate what a fish would necessarily be able to bioaccumulate. And so the dioxins, in a lot of these studies, you'll see dioxins at high concentrations. Some of the lower trophic organisms will actually accumulate them, but they can actually get rid of them pretty quickly as well. And they're just not biomagnified to that next trophic level that the PCBs ultimately are. So.
Hey, Trevor.
Yeah.
Is there a magic window of time or a preferred window of time to deploy the passive samplers, or would you expect to get better results or more informative results from deploying them longer?
I did look up a couple of studies, and they actually recommended them to have them out during the summertime. It's also better to have them out in a less chance of a log floating down and taking them out. Obviously it's when it's really trucking. I mean, even some of these sites, I mean, we were putting on like, oh, let's add another 10-pound sash weight because it looks kind of sketchy, with the flows or something, being able to pick it up. So I think deploying them at some other times of the year might be a little bit harder as well. But some of the studies I read, I was worried about that same question, and some of the studies I looked at, recommended that kind of, peak summertime as well. But
you have a prediction on when the fish tissue will be available?
You don't know what I've been through in the last one. I can't give a prediction. Yeah, it's out of my control. We're hoping soon. There's folks are working on it. We were hoping to have it ready by this meeting, and if we didn't have some of that quality assurance stuff to work through, we would have had it. So possibly in the next month, maybe a little longer. So yeah.
But are you hopeful about the quality of the data once you're able to parse this out? I mean, give us your sense of what that looks like.
Yeah, so I view like the blanks as like, okay, we didn't contaminate the sample because their lab blank is higher than ours is. The tissue blanks, I think that I have a way in my head how to correct for that. I'm kind of, DEQ's got a lot more experience in that kind of stuff, and so I'm waiting for kind of their guidance on that. But I mean, I think, we could easily correct for any of that contamination from the dioxins that we found in those solid blanks. And then I think just correcting the dioxin contribution itself, and then leaving that PCB contribution of the TEQ, and then that would probably get you at the number that I feel real confident in. So, yeah. Yes, Representative Curdy.
It's like Larry, the difference between Kelly Island and Harper's Bridge, that spike. Would you ever consider doing more in-depth additional samples from those two areas to figure out what might be the source? Because, that area is hit really hard with rafting traffic.
Yeah.
It's fished really hard.
Yeah.
So that is, could be a concern for, fish consumption out of that section of the river.
Sure. Well, we do have the data from EPA, from the risk assessments that kind of covered that area. So we've got pretty good fish data on that already. I mean, there's already a fish consumption avoid from the Bitterroot to the Flathead. And so from that perspective, we've covered it. And these I mean, again, these are estimated concentrations. DEQ takes water samples, they take sediment samples. They don't really have a box to put in like a passive sample or estimated water concentration. But these concentrations that are estimated, they're well below like, consumption, drinking water criteria and stuff like that. So we've, so that should be covered from a drinking water perspective. And then we already have, unfortunately, the fish consumption guidance already expanding through there. So. But as far as future work, I mean, we're, trying to get through all this stuff right now, but we're already having discussions about potential other areas to kind of assess. So.
Is part of that funding the next step?
Yes. And the grant's due in a couple of weeks.
Oh.
The next grant is fairly significant. It's what is it? Is it 300,000?
Minimum 300, yeah.
With $100,000 match.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of hard just to say, let's look at this section, or let's look at like coming up with a study for $300,000 is a lot.
The match is the issue too. I mean, so
match of 100.
Like Lindsay and I spent, I mean, especially Lindsay, spent hundreds of hours. I mean, probably close to 1,000 between the two of us. And we can't use any of our salary as match because we're already federally matched. And so we had to use a special budget, for our travel expenses, any of the equipment I bought for this, and then the rest of that match is going to come from all those partners you saw on that front page as we move into that outreach and education phase of it. So the match is the hardest part to come across.
Were there any questions online? Okay.
I want to say thanks, Trevor. You and your team and the partners, it's a big lift to do this kind of work. It's really appreciated.
You have one question in the chat.
I'll say thanks, Lindsay.
And you don't know what he's been through in the last month.
So there is a question, how far up the Flathead was the sampling done, Polson area? What was that farthest?
So the passive sampler was right at the Kukusin fishing access site. So that's, I don't have it on the top of my head, but David probably knows. The Kukusin, how far up the Flathead is Kukusin FAS?
It's just a couple miles.
Yeah, a couple miles, yeah. And then the fish were collected kind of all through that section. Obviously, they're close to the Clark Fork, so there's probability of them moving in there as well, but.
Okay. Well, thanks, Trevor.
I'm gonna share those treasures.
Can you share it without me making you co-host or?
I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
We're not letting you out.
I know. The names.
Careful of the cord.
I know, I was noting that of like I would fall, so. I think we're gonna be able to share some slides. Yeah, we're trying to figure out if we can do it without. Okay. It says I'm sharing the screen. No, see, I can't see. Okay, it says it's sharing, but it might just be a really slow. This is in the cement. That's. All right, and everyone's back online. Can we move the? That's all. Yeah. Okay. Okay. It's trying. Okay. It really wants to go. Okay. Can hear it. We might just there we go. There we go. Don't judge my huge amount of tabs. I don't think I can present it without crashing the system. Okay, we can see a little prelude. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Since our last meeting a month ago, we have been out in the field the whole time. So I think we were like days out from mobilizing for groundwater. And so today I just wanted to do a walkthrough of what's happened over the last month and then talk about what's coming up ahead of us and then leave time for questions. And so hopefully you can see these pictures because we have a lot of good pictures from the field to go through today. This is just an agenda. So field report out. There was a berm inspection, so it's not the normal high flows that we sometimes see in April and May yet, but we still do our monthly berm inspection. So we'll talk about that tonight and then have time for questions. So this is an updated timeline from our last meeting. And so I know it's really hard to see. I'll talk us through it, but basically we mobilized for 2 different sampling events, a groundwater and a soil sampling. If you go to our website and you're curious about the work plans, yeah.
Who's we?
We, everyone here. No, EPA and DEQ approved work plans for the prime or potentially responsible parties to get out in the field and collect data. And so I'm jumping right in because this has been a part of a lot of discussions over the past years. And we're finally able to kick off these addendum to the remedial investigation work plan that the PRPs conducted, which are the responsible parties, but that EPA and DEQ approved and had oversight over. Thank you, Kevin. And please interrupt me because I feel like I'm going from one meeting to the next if it's going too fast. But essentially, I'm starting off with Addendum 12A, if you're curious about the work plan components, and that detailed our groundwater sampling. And it started on April 1st. It was the Monday after our CAG meeting, so it might not have been exactly April 1st. And we had drillers on site to drill the groundwater monitoring boreholes. So we put in 10 new wells starting the first week of April. Then I'm going to just go down one line at a time. Then we recently, end of April, continuing now, they're out there today. We've sampled the new and existing groundwater wells using the groundwater sampling plan. We began drilling boreholes in the sludge ponds and solid waste basins after we completed the groundwater monitoring boreholes. And then we had a berm inspection in the middle of there. We had contractors out getting all the bottle orders, labeling, communicating with EPA, doing the shipping. The driller was only on site from the first week of April to about midway through. Then we also had to develop the new wells and survey the new wells. And we had EPA and DEQ oversight for all of that. And I just wanted to put this up as kind of a coordination figure of the different things that were happening. We had 2 field teams out the whole time. So 2 different oversight groups for EPA and DEQ, 2 different PRP groups out sampling or developing wells or drilling wells. And so it's been a really busy couple of weeks, which has been really fun. And I think we have some good pictures next. Well, so then I wanted to back out of like overall schedule, what's up for groundwater monitoring. So Addendum 12 work plan is what we're focused on. Q2, which is what just happened, was 12A. We're going to get back out in July and drill additional wells and sample the wells again. And then we'll have a new work plan for quarters 4 and 1 to monitor the wells a 3rd and 4th time. And our next slide is talking about soil sampling. So we're simultaneously adding on soil sampling. We were out in Q2 with Addendum 13. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we need to continue this work plan in Q3. We didn't get all the boreholes done this round. And then we also have an Addendum 14, which is wastewater pathway sampling that is yet to be kind of developed and timed, but I'll provide that update next month and as we kind of project forward. But there'll be a 4th soil sampling event as well. And so I'm going to start with the groundwater monitoring, the ponds and solid waste basins, and then talk about groundwater sampling. So we're going to kick it off with Addendum 12A. And this was drilling groundwater monitoring wells and sampling those new wells and the existing wells on site. And this is pretty small, but all the new wells are circled in yellow. So these are the new ones that were located this year based on a lot of stakeholder input and discussion to capture primary contaminant movement from the industrial area, the primary sludge and waste basin area toward the river. Starting the week of April 8th, we got in these wells. One of these is going to be a 26. We realized that after our last meeting. So monitoring wells 26 And I just realized this, but we have like SMW wells, which are Smurfit mill wells, NFMW wells, new fields monitoring wells, and now we just have monitoring wells adding on to the numbered list. These are in unit 1, so they're maximum 30 feet deep. We're capturing the shallow aquifer. And then for each of the new monitoring wells, we also took 3 soil samples from the boreholes. So as we drilled down into the groundwater, we collected data from the vadose zone, the transition zone, and the dry zone. So we wanted to look at contaminant movement from those areas down into the groundwater. And then we had to wait till the second week to get our last 2 wells in. And that was due to some access issues that I think we have slides on. All right, so here's some pictures from the field. These are typical sonic drill monitoring wells set up. So kind of following them around from MW30 on the berm here. This is the setup at MW27, and the farthest one is MW26. And I don't have as detailed slides, but we had to move some of the wells because of berm conveyance ditches that were located within the berm. And so for instance, along the down gradient side of pond 8, we didn't have clear access and had to move one of the locations just slightly into a different berm, but capturing the same kind of contaminant movement down gradient. And so this was a busy week of kind of getting all the new monitoring wells in, but the drillers didn't stop. And so we went into addendum 13 kind of seamlessly. So same O'Keefe drill team, same sonic drill setup, and they went into the solid waste basins and the primary sludge ponds. This happened from April 15th to April 24th. And then O'Keefe was booked and had to go off site. So we'll talk through what's left from that effort. Some more scenes from the field. And this is where things I think really got exciting, as can be expected. But we talked about this in the last meeting, but this is from solid waste basin A. We had a piece of metal come up from the borehole. This was from 10 to 15 feet deep. So we pulled sleeves at 5-foot intervals, opened those up, photographed them, documented the lithology, and then collected samples from the waste material, the transition zone, and the native material in each of the boreholes. And we're looking at contaminant levels in the waste material as it moves down toward the groundwater. And so each of the boreholes will have those 3 samples collected. We also included opportunistic samples. So while we were out on site, if we saw an oily sheen or had a smell, or if the volatile organic carbon reader went off, then you can collect a sample point right from there and document. This was an opportunistic sample from 8 to 10 feet, and here was the rationale for collecting it. So we had field teams out with constant communication, and Brianna and I were out there a lot to look at what's being collected, where are we targeting the samples from. Sent some selfies to Jerry while we were out there. And so these are some of the field photos that we have. I think I have another slide here. And then I just wanted to talk about what's left on 13. So this was a really exciting effort to get more information from those solid waste basins. We were able to complete either 2 or 3 boreholes in solid waste basin A, which is what the last picture was from with the metal, primary sludge pond 17.
No idea.
The 2 solid waste basins, C, little b and little a, pond 8, which is the emergency spill pond. Or is I calling you? It's Kenzie.
On this phone too, if it's me.
Yeah. Oh, okay. However, we had planned to get in primary sludge pond 3 and primary sludge pond 5. And that's where, I don't have access pictures here. That's where we had some issues because the ponds were really soft in the bottom. So the drill rig was sinking like 2 feet down. We had 1 broken windshield from getting stuck and trying to back out. And so there was a lot of issues with just getting in the primary sludge ponds. And these are obviously areas that we need to collect that information from. So in one area, which is the photo here, this is pond 5, they were able to construct a road while they were out there to get access down into the pond basin or the pond bottom. We did not have time to get the rest of the access figured out for pond 3 and the 2 remaining boreholes in pond 5. So the way that EPA and DEQ approved the work plan was that we would continue this sampling in July. So we're going to have the drill rig back on site in July for additional monitoring wells, which will be a great topic for us to talk about in June for everyone. And at that time, we can complete the addendum 13 boreholes and the sludge ponds and the solid waste basin. So didn't get through everything that we had planned. Yes, Larry.
Pond 5, is there some standing water in Pond 5 toward the river?
Yes.
So you were in the upper part of the pond.
We were trying to make it down. There's a little, like lower berm. I guess there used to be kind of in Pond 5, there's like a conveyance area and then the open area. They got out on that berm to get one.
Okay.
And then we have one planned down by where there's standing water, but didn't get down toward that area. So, yeah.
What about Pond 4?
Pond 4 was okay. Scary, I think.
What I mean, drive out on it, couldn't you?
Very, like, drive is a loose, they had a Tacoma out there, like testing out its shock system. Yeah, the table like sunk down.
You end up sampling in Pond 4.
In Pond 4,
4 feet, 5 feet?
they went lower than that. It got wet toward the bottom, but it's deeper than 4 or 5 feet.
Deeper than 4 or 5 feet?
Yeah, yeah. But that's something we talked about too, of just bringing back some of those photos and the depth of waste. That's going to be all information from this, but we can probably dig deeper into the field reports and provide a better update at the next meeting. This like just got completed a little bit ago. So exciting to just get pictures out for you guys, then hear what you're interested in kind of seeing. But it was deeper than that, but there was like crevasses between the like walking area and Pond 4. So it was exciting, but we got all 3 in Pond 4 in the planned spot. So they drove through the middle of the pond. The sonic drill rig is remote operated. So you could stand away as it maneuvered on its own toward the spot. Okay. I think that's kind of the big highlight of we successfully drilled the 10 new wells that were planned, got the majority of the primary sludge ponds and the solid waste basins. We're going to go back out in July to drill some additional wells and complete those efforts in the sludge and the spoils basins. I haven't mentioned, but those are planned for July as well. But while we were out on site on April 23rd, the first required berm inspection occurred. On the next slide, I just have kind of our normal bulletin for, hey, it's high flow season. You know, where can you go for information or what is EPA doing during this time? So during April, May, June, and July, there are required berm inspections of EPA overseeing the responsible parties completing the berm inspection. There's a Clark Fork River berm surveillance and contingency plan that details the inspection activities. If we note concerns with stability or excessive animal burrowing and we have high flows, there's response actions, and then there's a requirement for water samples to be taken if we see a discharge into the river during high flows. As the river rises, we can require weekly inspections. And then if we hit flood stage, we require daily inspections. And so April, we went out, it was a little more low key than usual. We have a couple pictures from the berm inspection. They drive the length of the berm, which is about 4 miles. And there are set locations that we stop at every year to document across the years, you know, where our river levels there were tension cracks identified after the 2018 flood. And so we're documenting those tension cracks in those photos. We also have areas of like extensive animal burrowing that we keep an eye on. This year, I think it was a lot of like the cattle. There is a farmer who grazes cattle out there and a lot of cattle tracks that are kind of digging into the berm that we need to keep an eye on. So just issues that would impact stability. There are 2 transducer stop locations that are photoed here. So we're monitoring river flow with those transducer locations. And our next one will occur mid-May. So we can kind of talk about an update in June as well. And then I think I'm gonna have Mackenzie come up and talk a little bit about community involvement too. And then we'll finish with what's upcoming in the next couple weeks and months. Okay, I can probably start talking and then finish by the time I get up there. It's worth it. So, as a lot of you know, we gathered for Frenchtown working group meetings right before these meetings. There's about an hour break for us to rehydrate and then drive out here. So we publish summaries, pretty detailed summaries of those. Or the plan is we've only had one. This is our second one today. So moving forward, like last month, we're going to publish these detailed summaries on our website. We also share out those summaries with the Frenchtown Working Group listserv just to make it accessible. If that's something you're all interested in receiving as well, once they're finalized, we're happy to share that out. It's publicly available information. So I can send it to the CAG listserv as well if that's preferred. We also shared twice weekly updates, Allie's sort of field updates from on Mondays and Fridays during field events. You will see a decrease in cadence of those emails as we're not in the field and have no field reports to report. But once we ramp back up in July, you'll see those coming again twice a week. We hope those have been helpful. And Jerry, thank you for publishing those. You said on the CAG Facebook page. Awesome. I hope that people have seen them and find them useful. We like putting them together. It's great. And then Jerry also hopefully pointed out that we should mention that we also contribute to the Frenchtown School District newsletter. That also that stops, I think, in June or after the June edition, but we're here. We can still answer your questions should you have them. Just not through the Frenchtown School District newsletter. And then we also love to participate in public engagement opportunities. Just this week, we were lucky to sit with Elena and Jen at University of Montana for Abby's presentation. She did her Smurfit presentation as her senior thesis just a couple days ago. So we got to sit and have a nice productive panel conversation there. So we're always looking for things like that too. So don't hesitate to invite us out. We love to hang out and we love coming up here. So anything like that, just please send it our way. And that's it.
One more slide for me. How about this? So right now the crews are out doing the crews are out there doing groundwater monitoring right now. I think they should be done either end of next week or the week after. And then we'll be back on site in July for more drilling of monitoring wells and in the ponds, basins, and spoils basins. And then we'll do Q3 groundwater monitoring following drilling the new wells again. And then we were gonna say we're meeting in June with the Frenchtown Working Group. July is a holiday time, so we needed to think about if there's another date or plan to meet in August after all the data collection. And then I meant to mention in year 2, we did talk earlier with the working group about our data issues from the fall 2023 event. And so I know this group is also really interested in that groundwater data. We don't have validated data or a data summary report to share yet. We're working on getting that for you guys. I don't think it'll be the 1st of June. It might be closer to mid-June, July, but definitely by August, we should have a report out of the fall 2023 groundwater data. But sorry, that was not ready tonight. And then we also have the climate vulnerability assessment team aware that we'd like to bring them out when there's a good time that works. They're not available in June. We did find that out. So if there's a time that we want to bring them out to the CAG meeting, we're working on reviewing their report now that we've made it through. So we've all been in the field, so we haven't looked at the draft report, but we're going to provide input and then make sure we can schedule a time with them to come out that works for the CAG too.
August, maybe?
I think we could definitely get August on their calendar. Yeah.
Put that out there?
Yeah. And we could do the fall 2023 groundwater data in August as well. And then here's our contact information.
Do you have other data to present in August, do you suppose?
I think we could do more photo data of what's coming out of the boreholes and the sleeves. We're not going to probably have lab data back, but I think we'd have depth of material, some of these things that are recorded in the field that we could share.
So what happens if the ground continues to be super soft in sampling in Q1? How do you make that up? And
I think so we're sitting down with the PRPs for a full day coming up soon to talk about access issues and the upcoming work plan for July. And they kind of created a road out. There's a way to kind of move earth that could stabilize it. They talked about laying down a geotextile fabric with gravel. Or if we need to use a lighter equipment and do test pitting, and that's just a proposal, would EPA be okay with test pitting and to what depth if the ponds are shallower? So I think it's kind of all on the table right now, and we need to just sit down and look at, this is information we need, and I think there's ways to get it, and just how do we put that all together? And that was kind of getting them off site and then having a couple months to look at how do we get safe access. So I think we'll have a good update on that in July of how we get in there, because we're going to figure it out. But
Ellie, you have a question on board.
Have we interviewed stoneworkers to see if they remember where the hottest spots are, where some of the worst stuff was likely disposed of? Yeah, we have interviews from that Missoula County has put together and shared. I've talked to a couple, and then there's a lot from the PASI of a record of meeting with employees and looking at like the boneyard area is a place we targeted in solid waste basin C(a), and that's where drums were staged historically. And then behind an old barn out there is another area of interest that we put a borehole in to target. So we have some historic accounting. My predecessor went on site with an employee, a former employee, and went out to an area where he had thought there might be dumping. But I think any historical accounts, all of that, we're also breaking because there was a concern of a asbestos landfill that wasn't gated off. Like, so there are areas on site that have fencing and it's labeled asbestos. So we don't need to characterize that. We know it's asbestos, but we're worried that some of the solid waste basins didn't actually have that. And so we're going to look back at historic records and meet with interviewees to make sure we're not going to get into asbestos unaware. And there's just one area that is next to solid waste basin CA that we think there used to be fencing that there is no longer. And so that's part of just kind of doing that historical research and making sure that we're not getting anything bad.
Metal you found, was that like siding or what was it?
But I looked back at solid waste basin A was a general refuse. So it had food, metal, plastics. I think like it was just a mill dump spot, but it was like, could be any scrap metal that was down in there. So.
Because the drill could have spiraled.
Yeah, true. Just a scrap metal.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. We also, I don't know that we were like both just like, oh, it's so cool. There's a bunch of paper in one of them that got pulled up in the sleeve too.
Someone has a picture.
Yeah.
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 No dead bodies.
Nobody. Actually.
Yeah, that was.
So we do biological surveys before and I just talked to Brian Ballmer about this, but for Fish and Wildlife Service, there are endangered species out there. It's like grizzly, lynx, and another one. So we haven't seen grizzly tracks there. It's not a huge concern, but we do document that as a part of Endangered Species Act. And then we have Migratory Bird Act and other things that we follow. But she was looking around and she saw a dead elk in a culvert, but the culvert was straight up. So she thought it would just like ran and fell in because it wasn't like dragged in there. It just, yeah.
You starved in there. It's very sad. There's a lot of raccoons back there.
There's marmots now, Jen.
There's a lot of raccoons back there.
Yeah,
And what's the ground squirrel?
It's becoming like a safari over there. Yeah, it's pretty crazy. We've seen a lot of elk over there. Yeah. Yes. There's one. I guess I didn't stay up here for questions, but if there are questions.
Did you see a bunch of emails?
A lot of emails. Yeah. It went from like really nice days to really windy to snowy to rain. Yeah. Yeah. We had some oversight people up from California that were just in like full down jackets. It's like, where did you put me? Yeah.
Yeah. They're real champs though.
That's good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now it's public comment or questions, allow time needed as needed. And then it's possible agenda topics for June. Does anybody have any comments or questions?
I just want to thank EPA team for sending the weekly updates. Very much appreciate that kind of communication, and really it helps us quite a bit, and I happy to share it on social media. So I feel that they Daughter finally getting it together now. It's only been what? 2 years. We got it.
Yeah. So it's going well, and we'll get reports from, I think the Clark Fork has something they want to talk about in June. And then are you all talking in June?
Yeah, I think we'll talk about finished sampling and the proposed work plan, and we can put some detail in about the boreholes and things.
And then there was,
the Montana State Poet Laureate Chris Littrey is going to be speaking. His father worked at the mill site and he grew up in Frenchtown.
Nice.
And so there was also a little bit of conversation around maybe having more of like an open house before some of the more technical stuff. So does anybody have any ideas or thoughts about that?
I'm in favor.
Okay, so Dee is buying the food.
What do you serve?
I mean, I don't, yeah. Oh, wait, okay, we have, oh.
You wouldn't want this one.
Deb said thank you to everyone. Is there any other public comments or things from folks online? As it kind of gets tricky. Okay, thanks, Deb. Oh, there's another chat. Okay. Any plan for a float past the mill? Always.
Always. We ran out of time last year, I think. Didn't we? I don't know what happened.
It didn't happen.
It didn't happen.
I said I didn't know what happened. We just ran out of time.
I mean, it's not like we're worried about high water.
Famous last year.
Yeah, I know. I was like, sure.
Okay, guys.
Instead of a float, you wade.
Stanley's pulling a boat. Okay, so I think people support the idea for a float, but,
Heck, you can drive the dikes along the river there.
you get us access, Larry.
Yeah.
Okay, but anyway, I think generally plan for maybe spending more time in June. There might be more of a not standard meeting, but probably not a float. Maybe that would be July, where we skip an actual meeting or something.
Hey, we're gonna have the meeting while we float.
What's everybody thinking for the June open house, like similar to what we did before with tables? I heard fish fry.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to extend an invitation to tribal council members as well to come down.
I think that was well received when we had a bunch of different tables and people could talk about things and it was maybe like a little more open to folks who.
Try and get Mineral County information board up here.
Yeah.
So when is that? On June
6th.
6th? Because we're invited to the senior citizens luncheon on June 5th.
It's on my calendar. I hear the food's great.
It is really good. It's great. So we'll be there. So we could announce.
That would be great.
Make sure that they can come on the 6th, which that's a pretty big group. I mean, there's about 65-ish, 70 of them that come. And they really, I mean, they're very interested in what's happening.
They listen to it all.
They're very, very interested. So I'm excited that we're gonna visit with that group.
I will volunteer DEQ to help support any organization of that, considering that we have somebody who's public policy experience and community engagement and all of the things. And so however we can help with the open house coordination, utilize our.
Perfect. Who else is volunteering people?
Just a poster of like information that we have like a keynote speaker. Is that the, because we can just put like I could do my presentation in a poster that just be written
Yeah,
down.
I think it would make sense to have a mingle and an informal and some things around the room and then have some food or something and then have Chris talk or something like that. Like if we needed
It's really good.
more official presentation or if there was maybe like a round robin for questions, that sounds like it'd be good.
So we're doing like tag time, same window.
I think you
maybe do 5 to 7.
Yeah, I think we'd want to shoot over a little early if that's okay with your coordination.
I think that's fine.